welcome to our webinar hosted by the American Public Human Services Association, also known as APHSA, in partnership with Argyle. Today's webinar topic is Human-Centered Income Verifications, Improve Programs, and Build Trust. We can go to the next slide. So my name is Francesca Robinson. I'm an instructional designer with APHSA, and I'd love to just take a few moments to share a little bit about who we are and the work we're proud to do alongside of our members. At APHSA, we represent human services agencies at the state, county, and city levels from across the country. We're a bipartisan organization dedicated to building common ground and generating practical solutions that work for people and communities. Next slide, please. And so we aim to advance the well-being of individuals, families, and communities through three core channels. So we influence modern approaches to sound policy, build the capacity of public agencies, and connect leaders to accelerate learning and generate practical solutions. So our vision is one of thriving communities built on human potential. Next slide, please. And while we're on the topic of staying connected, I just want to make sure everyone is aware of the APHSA conferences that we're hosting in 2026. And those will be in Arlington, Virginia, New Orleans, Louisiana, Spokane, Washington, and Salt Lake City, Utah. You can go to the event page at aphsa.org throughout the year to learn about these conferences, including when you can register, keynote speakers, and different sessions. And then next slide. So lastly, APHSA also offers a career center. So it's a dedicated job board and talent marketplace designed specifically to connect professionals with career opportunities across the human services sector. So it really provides a valuable resource for individuals seeking new roles, advancing their careers, or exploring other opportunities within the sector. And then before I turn it over, just a few housekeeping items. So as you've noticed, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be circulated shortly after the event to anyone who registered. And then during the webinar, we are requesting that you put any questions you have for the presenters in the Q&A panel. The normal chat feature has been disabled for this session. Our panelists will try to type responses to as many as possible live, but they'll also have time at the end to answer any questions. So with all of that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Carol Husey.
Hi, Francesca. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome. We're really glad you could join us today. We're here to talk about something that every single one of you on this call has experienced firsthand, whether you're on the program side or the technology side or supporting these systems in any way, it's income verification. And I think we could all agree that it's still one of the most manual, frustrating, and resource-intensive parts of eligibility. So if we don't get this right, it slows down the determinations. It creates rework. It puts pressure on your workforce. And it creates a pretty difficult experience for the people who ultimately we're trying to serve. And so what makes this moment different and why this conversation matters right now is that those pressures are only increasing. Medicaid work requirements are changing, increased ex parte expectations, program integrity scrutiny, and of course, workforce shortages. So the reality is the current approach is becoming harder to sustain. So today we're going to have a very practical conversation about what's not working, what's changing, and what a different approach could really look like. So before we jump in, I'd like to introduce our panel. Next slide, please. We have with us a great lineup today, great group who I've had the privilege of working with for a little bit now. Brian Geary, the president of Argyle. Alicia Rouault, she's the former CIO for Pennsylvania HHS. And Jennifer Banyan, who's the director of public sector partnerships at Argyle. And as Francesca mentioned, I'm Carol Husey, and I work with Argyle, and I'm your moderator for today. So before we jump into our slides and our conversation, we're going to start off with a poll question. So if you could cue that up for us, David. And our first poll is, what systems do you use today for income verification? Many states do this differently. You may have a single database that you use, like a work number. You may do manual data document collection, third-party verifiers. You could use some combination of all of these things. If you could just take a moment to vote there, and then we will see the results of that poll. Just a minute. Maybe. All right. Here we go. Combination. It's usually what we hear, right? Because, any one of these provides different types of things. There's no sort of silver bullet, right? So this is where a lot of states currently exist in terms of how they are doing their verifications. So we're going to talk a lot about these various methods today, and we'll see, which ones really reinforce, that it's not always just a technical issue. We're dealing with operational aspects, workforce aspects, and of course, at the forefront, the client experience. So let's get started with our presentation, and we're going to get grounded first in the current landscape. And so Brian is going to kick us off.
All right. Thanks, Carol. And thanks to everyone in attendance today. Looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, so as Carol mentioned, obviously kind of income verification is still one of the most manual, error-prone, and costly steps in the determination process. And as she mentioned, it's, continues to get harder with Medicaid work requirements, new SNAP accuracy standards, new verification timelines that require, kind of looking at this more often. So, just to kind of lay out some of the problems that, are probably near and dear to most of the folks on this call's hearts. One example is from a time perspective. There's a wide range of outcomes, on how long it takes to verify income. But in some cases, this can stretch into days or weeks, particularly with back and forth and, kind of document heavy approaches that may require kind of rework or, kind of re-going back to the consumer. At the same time, costs of some of the legacy systems that you likely use continue to increase, and in some publicized cases, those fees have doubled in, a matter of kind of 2 or 3 years. So we've got rising costs, we've got rising volume, and we have a process that still largely depends on a very document-heavy and manual review process. If we go a little bit deeper, some of the existing solutions that exist today have major coverage gaps, especially for the modern workforce. So these traditional sources don't really cover, a large portion of this growing population. One, key example of that is gig workers. So a stat that we heard recently is 24% of the US workforce is engaged in some form of the gig economy. And that population is disproportionately represented in benefit-eligible households. We also know that data quality is a major driver of errors in the process. And when you're dealing with documents in particular, what we hear is that they're trying to kind of like reconstruct income versus just trying to verify it. So they're trying to piece together income from documents that they're receiving, and they have to really kind of put that income picture together, which can be time consuming at home. And so that's the biggest reason why income verification is one of those the number one driver of application errors. So again, the kind of results are predictable. Cases are sitting and pending. There's a high workload for caseworkers, and that continues to grow. We've got high error rates, and we've got rising costs. And so with that, next slide. So there is some good news, on the horizon. At Argyle, we've been focused on, kind of pioneering a CBV solution in the market. Others, exist out there as well. But what that really gives you is access to digital data with the client's permission. So let me just take a second and define what CBV or consent-based verification is. So it allows an applicant to securely connect their payroll or bank account. And then that data is retrieved in real time and delivered to a state agency. So this is, instead of obviously uploading pay stubs, screenshots, etc., you're getting that data directly from the source that pays individuals or applicants today. Let me just take a second and define what consent-based verification or CBV is not. It's not estimated or modeled income. It's not screen scraping. It's also not a lagging database. Again, it's that kind of secure, direct from the source, and permissioned. I think the key kind of point here, permissioned by the applicant or the client to be able to access that data. So what we're showing on the slide here is, a bit of a before and after. Again, kind of building off of the pain points, particularly for a document-heavy process, there can be a lot of back and forth. A caseworker requests documents, they wait for those to get submitted, it goes into a queue, they review those documents. Oh, you uploaded a picture of your cat instead of the income document that I needed. Now I'm going back and asking you again, and we basically kind of repeat this cycle. So again, with consent-based verification, this can be a much simpler process. The applicant clicks on a secure link. This can be embedded within an application. It can be embedded within a re-verification flow. It can be emailed or texted to the applicant. It can also live off of a QR code. So if it's a paper application that they're filling out or they're walking into an office, all of these ways for them to kind of get this experience in front of them. They log into their payroll provider, employer, gig platform, bank, the same way that they would log in today. And then that kind of, once that connection is made, that data is kind of packaged into a report and delivered directly to the agency. So we've got some strong statistics, to share the success here. One of which is, over kind of 2/3 reduction in days post pending, post an interview with the use of things like CBV. And over 90% of caseworkers reported that this was easier to use than some of these legacy methods, particularly for documents. So maybe just a quick recap on some of the problems we had talked about. Document processes are hard to scale. We think this is a great tool to have in your toolkit to reduce burden not only on the caseworker but also the applicant. The coverage gaps, folks like Argyle and others have very kind of wide-ranging coverage in the market, and particularly in this kind of gig workforce that is very underserved with other databases. Data quality driving errors. We are delivering again kind of verified data directly from the source. And then last, cost. These CPV providers are can be up to kind of fractions of what some of these other providers are charging in the market. So with that, actually, let me just hit one more point here, which is just to address a couple of concerns that you may have as you think about this, or have kind of talked to some folks in the market. Is CBV kind of all or nothing? I think our take is it does not need to be a replacement for kind of everything that you're doing today for income verification. I think Carol mentioned at the top that no provider has 100% coverage here in the market, but we do think this is a great tool to have in your toolkit as a way to again kind of reduce burden on both the caseworker and the applicants. And then maybe the final point here is is this really kind of theory, or has this been used in production, particularly in this government benefits and social services use case? And there is lots of kind of studies here where states are using this in production, in pilots today, again as a way to to kind of to benefit both the applicant and the caseworkers.
Brian,
So maybe
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, we have a few questions that have popped into the Q&A feature. I thought perhaps we could pause before we go through the rest of the slide to address these questions.
Okay.
The first one is, does the direct source mean that the verification is against the applicant's employer's HR or payroll system?
Yeah, exactly. So the direct source does mean that data is coming directly from the HR, payroll, or employer system. So this is the system where they are getting paid today. And so that data is coming directly from the source. So the consumer or applicant needs to verify their identity as they log in to the system. And then that data is being retrieved directly in real time from the source.
Thank you. And then we have another question. You mentioned that CBV doesn't involve screen scraping. Isn't robotic process automation used as a fallback when Argyle doesn't have a direct API connection with a payroll provider?
Yeah, so this is really all, kind of secure and API driven, at least from our perspective. There may be other practices that occur in the market, but that's how we see it from our side.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks for the questions and the engagement. I was going to segue over to Alicia.
Thanks so much, Brian. Go to the next slide. Awesome. So, I'll tell you a little bit about how we actually applied consent-based verification at the state level. And I actually had the benefit of piloting consent-based verification both federally and at the state level on two different programs. But in Pennsylvania, when I was there, Pennsylvania is one of the largest and most complex Medicaid and SNAP programs in the country. And at the time, we were facing considerable challenges in steady state benefits administration, but also in the context of having to implement all the changes that all states are grappling with from HR 1. And so one of our initial focuses was, excuse me, thinking about how do we reduce our payment error rate. And in order to do that for SNAP, we needed to really understand what was actually happening with the error rate, what wasn't working. And some of the challenges that we found after speaking directly with frontline caseworkers was really all pointing to income reporting as one of the major error causes. And so needing to reduce our payment error rate, we wanted to think about what would be some solutions to improving income reporting, both on the client side as well as on the caseworker side. So when clients were verifying their income, one of the things that we would see a lot were blurry images, the wrong document being uploaded, like Brian mentioned, maybe some pictures of cats, but also inconsistent data formats. So we would sort of see different types of data coming from different places. And for the gig labor population, so folks who maybe have 1099 income, are working at Uber or DoorDash, that was really hard data to get. And we weren't getting that consistently. So an enormous amount of effort was being spent both by people who are trying to determine their eligibility for benefits, but also with staff. So, we really evaluated our options here and ultimately decided on conducting a pilot with one of Argyle's partners, Digital Public Works, who brought consent-based verification in for SNAP verifications. And we had some concerns. Would this potentially inadvertently introduce more friction? Would we be adding a step that would potentially make it actually harder to verify income? And what we found actually was the opposite. So excitingly, and we actually have some data from a recent CMS pilot on this. Almost 80% of users said that after CBV was introduced, that it made verification easier, not harder. Um, we also found that it was pretty quick. So users could complete a full verification session and submit all of their data under 15 minutes consistently, often at much lower time spans. So fundamentally, this is reducing processing time so folks can get their benefits more quickly if eligible. It's improving the accuracy, so the data that we were getting was consistent, structured, and ultimately more useful for a caseworker. And it was broader, right? So we had new sources of data that were coming directly from the source. Next slide. Ultimately, we saw this translate with some early results into those faster determinations, which ultimately can reduce backlog and reduce our payment error rate, which is really important in the context of benefits administration right now. Ultimately, this gave us, again, better data to help us drive faster eligibility determinations This also helps with program integrity, right? So if we have more consistent, more accurate data, we know that the right people are gaining eligibility and access to the program, and the people who are ineligible are not. Um, it's ultimately less rework. You can actually re-verify your income quite easily, which is great, as we sort of seek generally to reduce the administrative burden on the population. Um, and the final point I'll make is that overall, this verification solution was a lot less costly than traditional sources. So I think there's a good statistic from another state from North Carolina who are currently using legacy verification services. And year over year, that cost is rising. So, there's been a lot of articles in the press and sort of research on this, and we've seen that, their cost of verification using a legacy system has doubled within a 3-year span. Um, so we were definitely pleased with sort of the cost of verification, and ultimately this was a very successful pilot. So we saw that it took only 6.5 minutes to complete consent-based verification, and it's just, now an accurate minor step in something that's much more important, which is the broader eligibility determination cycle. So it was a success. I'll pass it on to Jennifer.
Before we move on, Jennifer, if you could just hold 1 minute. We have a couple of questions that have come in that I think Alicia might be able to help us respond to. Both Brian and Alicia mentioned that CBV is also beneficial for income verification in the gig economy. And they're asking if we could explain that in a little bit greater detail in terms of how that was beneficial.
I can jump in at the high level, and then Alicia, if you want to
Yeah,
follow
go
up.
for it.
Where we focus our coverage is, some of the most common places or employers in the gig economy, things like Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, Lyft, etc. So the income that these folks receive, they're typically 1099 workers. It is harder to verify, like they're not getting a pay stub as an example. So there's like less documentation to be able to actually kind of pass through. And so through this consent-based system, we allow that worker to log into their system. We're retrieving all of that, both income and hours worked from, the kind of time they're spent doing some of these rides or deliveries. And then we can kind of pass all of that through as part of the report.
Thank you, Brian. Another question, I think you might want to answer this one also, Brian. Does this still require the customer to obtain the info with more steps? The work number allows the CSM to pull the info with consent, and it's immediate. Have you completed a comparable cost analysis? And if so, what were the results?
Yeah, I know I mentioned, kind of cost in my earlier remarks, and I know Alicia mentioned it as well. I think the biggest piece here is there is a significant cost savings by using CBV providers versus some of the legacy providers. Why is that? Part of it is we're kind of cutting out the middleman, where we don't need to go and kind of purchase that data and put it in a database from some of these payroll platforms, but we're relying on the consent of the consumer or applicant to be able to access that data. The way that I think a lot of folks are thinking about it is, hey, I likely need to build a data cascade or a waterfall. I should likely start with, the least expensive kind of version of that first, and maybe I fall back to something that is more expensive as a second step.
Mm-hmm. And then one more here, and then we'll move on to Jennifer. I find errors are created by benefit processing systems, duplication, dropping a decimal, etc., more than an uploaded document received from the customer entered by a CSM. It sounds like the CBV was tested with agencies that are using legacy systems and no access to the many social services wage verification systems that allow the CSM to request the upload. Is that correct?
I don't know if this answers the question fully, but I'll just say that the data that's coming from consent-based verification is the same data that is on your pay stub. It's the exact same data coming from the exact same source. So in our context, yes, a user could upload a pay stub, or they could pull their data from the payroll provider using consent-based verification. So ultimately, it is the same data. So you wouldn't have that sort of like dropping a decimal. It also, in our system, was ingested directly into the system. So we didn't have sort of issues with um, sometimes that things happen with data entry, manual data entry, where you're trying to like type in data off of a physical pay stub. So
Mhm.
it made the data more structured and more useful.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. One more, and then we'll move on to Jennifer. Is there an agreement required with the source data system?
In this case, for using consent-based verification, no, we're relying on the consumer's, basically access and ownership of that data to access it.
Excellent. Thank you. We do have a few other questions. We're going to hold those for a little bit, and we're going to proceed with the presentation, and we're going to invite Jennifer to come on next.
Thank you. And I'm so glad there are these great questions, and we will have time for that. And I want to thank Alicia for putting that context and that real life experience in, because I think states learning from states' experiences is really important as we try to do this very quickly. So I spent my career trying to make these systems work better for the people who rely on them and the workers that show up every day to help. And in my experience, it's been way harder to do that than it sounds. The gap between what these programs are supposed to do and what people actually experience has always been a bit painful to watch. But for me, something has shifted, and I'm seeing that the technology is finally starting to catch up to the mission, and that's not a line I say lightly. I ran eligibility systems. I managed the staff who process these cases. I watched caseworkers who came to this work because they genuinely cared end up spending their days chasing documents instead of helping families. And that's not what they signed up for. And the families waiting on those determinations, wondering why it's taking so long to prove what they already know about their own lives, didn't sign up for that either. And what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is how we can fix that. Now, each bullet on this slide is a real pressure point hitting states right now, all at the same time. We have Medicaid work requirements and recurring verification. So we all know that starting January 1st of 27, states must verify eligibility twice a year for Medicaid expansion adults. And that doubles determination workload overnight for that population. And if you have SNAP and Medicaid dual caseworkers, this is coming on top of whatever SNAP pressure your teams are already experiencing. And your caseworkers are trying to absorb all of this, and they need better tools for accuracy, efficiency, and to deliver the ready to work cases. I think everyone on this call knows that one touch and done is the key, not pending, not reworking, not chasing down a second verification. So this is real-time verified. And also there's client expectations. They're living in the same digital world we are. They're interacting with their bank, their healthcare portal, their employer, all in real time. And that's a process that takes days to do in some states. And this is what mortgage lenders can do in seconds. And so it feels like the system maybe doesn't believe in them, that they somehow must work harder to get what they need to feed their families and access healthcare. And what we're talking about now is 6.5 minutes medium CBV completion time. And that changes the experience entirely. It also frees caseworkers to do what actually requires a human, the collateral context, the complex cases, the conversations that no algorithm can have. And 85% of applicants using Argyle reported no difficulty completing the verifications. And I think that's, again, going back to dignified and human-centered. We're also looking at increased financial penalties tied to performance. The SNAP error rate clock is already running. FY26 ends in 5 months. States above 6% errors will start paying a share of the cost in February of 27. But here's the hopeful part for me, states investing in better verification technology this year can still move that number now and for future years. There's still a window where this isn't going to be permanent. And income verification is the #1 driver of the payment errors, and that's solvable with technology and better efficiency. We're also seeing, of course, the program integrity pressure, the workforce shortages, and increased ex parte. So we all know also federal administrative funding for SNAP is cut by 50% next year. Every hour a caseworker spends chasing a pay stub is an hour they're not doing the work that requires a human being. CMS has built Emmy, including the Medicaid CBV, which Argyle is the verification engine powering it. Many states are already piloting it. Emmy is a Medicaid tool. The SNAP side still needs consent-based verification. If your Medicaid workflow uses consumer permission verification and SNAP doesn't, you've created 2 different processes for the same worker and the same family. That friction and confusion doesn't need to exist. If your workflows and tools are aligned, your ex parte is going to increase and you're going to have a more dignified experience, a more consistent experience for both recipients and your workforce. And sadly, we've seen what happens when a state loses staffing capacity and doesn't have efficiency tools in place. I know of a state that has lost nearly half of its SNAP caseload in 7 months, and that includes 180,000 children. And at the same time, that state has seen unemployment rise and groceries getting more expensive. That's a capacity and systems issue, and it's avoidable. So when we say this isn't just operational improvement, it's dignity in the process, we mean it on every level. It's dignity for the caseworker who isn't buried in paperwork. It's dignity for the client who isn't asked to prove themselves 5 times over. And it's a system that finally works the way it should for everyone involved. Let's go to the next slide. So what leading states are doing now. So states getting ahead of this are doing 5 things, high-level things, and probably a heck of a lot more. This is multitasking and 3-dimensional chess. But none of it requires waiting for the perfect procurement cycle. So states are evaluating verification cost and identifying low-cost alternatives. First, do an honest accounting of what verification actually costs you today, not just the contract. Look at the staff hours, the rework, the 45-day, 30-day pending queues. Some states, as we mentioned earlier, have seen their legacy verification costs double in 3 years. Some have seen them quadruple. And Argyle can reduce that spend by 90%, giving you back money that you're going to need for capacity and system improvement. Our CBV also gives you your caseworker capacity back, and that is a game changer. And we can help you run that analysis for your systems. States are implementing CBV models as part of a data cascade, and adding Argyle as a first touch before manual fallback. It's not a system replacement. It should be at the top of the cascade. This creates immediate volume reduction with no overhaul required. Our CBV has a clear advantage across all worker types and a decisive one on gig workers. So the traditional databases were built on W-2 relationships, and they miss Uber 1099, people working 2 part-time jobs. And that's often your highest error rate population. And our CBV goes directly to the source. States are aligning policy and tech early. A lot of states have struggled trying to run these 2 tracks separately until the deadline was too close. That's a structural challenge that every state faces when a federal mandate like this lands so quickly. But what early movers are doing differently is getting the right people in the room from the start. The integration complexity under these timelines is real, and early alignment makes the difference between a pilot that expands and one that sits. Leading states are engaging legal and privacy teams up front. Consent-based architecture is a compliance asset. Argyle is designed with privacy at the center. The client initiates it, the client controls it. The data comes from the enrollee with their explicit permission. In states with active litigation or advocacy partners, watching systems changes, all of this architecture matters. So, we're really seeing that engaging your legal team early builds the institutional confidence needed to move these system changes forward. And states are starting with target populations rather than trying to do everything at once. The most successful implementations have started out focused. Maybe it's a specific program, a specific population. Maybe it's SNAP renewals or Medicaid redeterminations for people subject to community engagement. Try to get the win, document it, expand it. Pennsylvania didn't require a full system overhaul on day one, and neither does any state. For the vendors and system integrators on the call, your state clients must meet these requirements. And Argyle is not a replacement. We're the income verification layer that makes your platform more accurate, more compliant, and more competitive. In closing, I just want to say, as a practitioner for a lot of my career and a director, caseworkers are the heroes of this work. And they deserve tools that match the commitment they bring. And the people we serve deserve a process that treats them with dignity. And the tools exist. We're being asked to get more information from folks. We need to make it easier. These tools work in your current workflow. You don't need a multi-year modernization to get started. We'd love to talk with you after this webinar, hear about your state, the struggles you're facing, your error rate, your caseload, your timeline, and see how Argyle could fit and how fast we can move and improve together. And I do notice there's a few people on the call that aren't working just in Medicaid and SNAP. So if you run a nonprofit program, child support services, low-income heating assistance, childcare assistance, affordable housing, anywhere income and employment verification is part of your work, we can make it easier and more accurate. We have the highest coverage rate, conversion rate, and cost 90% less than legacy verification providers. So whenever and wherever you need income verification, that's what we're built to do. And what ties this all together is a closing thought on the side. Trust, accuracy, and efficiency can coexist. And that's really the whole arc of today has been about. You don't have to choose between a rigorous process and a humane and dignified one. The tools exist, the proof points exist, and the question now is, when do we start doing this?
I love that closing thought, Jennifer. We do have a couple questions here. The first one could go technically or programmatically. So I'm going to start with you, and then if Brian wants to weigh in, of course. Does the customer have to authorize consent-based verification on an annual basis? And have you encountered any issues with employers knowing that you have access to the information rather than the customers?
I can take that one, which is obviously with re-verifications, you are needing to pull data on a periodic basis, maybe every 6 months or every year. And so there's a couple of ways that CBV and Argyle can help with that. There are cases that we can continue to kind of maintain that access over a longer period of time, where you can pull that data in the background. If that is not the case, then we have also built some workflows that make it easier to reauthorize that information. For example, like a one-click connection versus having to search for your employer or payroll platform again, and then kind of go through the login process again.
Thank you, Brian. Is there an opportunity to expand a service of this nature to educational sources as well, as this would be helpful for upcoming HR1 requirements specific to Medicaid?
Good thought, for sure. That's not our kind of current focus, but there may be some providers out there in the space that do something like that.
Yeah. And then are Medicaid Perm and SNAP QC review teams also using consent-based verification, or could they?
Yeah, for me, I think this is absolutely what we should be using, trying to sort through different verifications that are coming in, eaves hits, and all of the different wage data that's presented in front. I think it's going to be incredibly important for folks working on training and decreasing error rates, having access to this type of information. It's a source of truth that is always current, and that's, kind of what we need to improve on every cycle of a quality improvement piece to get the error rate down. And certainly perm, a lot of people are not talking about it. And we also believe that CBV is going to help reduce that as well. And we need to be talking about that. I think just the train coming down the tracks right now, there's a couple other ones going faster than that.
For sure. That's for sure. Well, we do. We have had so many great questions. We're gonna launch into two more poll questions here, and then we'll open up for some more questions. So David, if you want to queue up the polls. All right. So we talked about this earlier. Brian stepped through a scenario, right? Like typically on an average case, right? How many touches and actions does it take to verify within your organization? We have some options there, some ranges. Okay, we got folks are still voting. We'll give it another few seconds here. Yeah, this is one of the key areas, right, that we want to improve upon, and a lot of reasons for that, as Brian had pointed out earlier. So we want to make sure that we're reducing those touches to get those eligibility determinations quicker, get services delivered quicker, all of those things. So let's see those results, David. Okay. 1 to 3, that's impressive, right? 4 to 6, we've got a few in the 7 to 9 and a few in the 10 plus. So yeah, that's great. Excellent. We are now going to roll into our third poll question. This is the final poll for this session today. That looks like this. Oh, we have a different question there. So this is the actions that we're taking here of the things that we're looking at today. I think the question there is wrong, so let me rephrase that for you. In terms of the desired results of implementing a consent-based verification tool or improving your methods for verification, of the options that you see here, which one of these would be most advantageous to your organization? So these are the areas that you're probably most struggling with. Voting is going on now. Obviously, all of these are things that we would hope to improve upon, but also some agencies struggle with certain aspects of this more than others. I had one jurisdiction tell me that they weren't struggling with workforce vacancies, which one of the few from that I've talked to. So maybe for those types of organizations, it would be something else. All right, let's see the results. We've got about 34% of the people voted at this point. Okay, more accurate determinations. A lot of reasons we need that, right? Certainly with everything that's happening federally, we want to make sure that we are compliant. But again, getting those accurate determinations made is certainly critical to ensuring that people are getting the benefits that they need. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for participating in the polls. We are going to just we're going to move into, we can take those slides down for the moment. We wanted to kind of just launch into a little bit of just more of a conversation at this point. You can see all our faces and view this as just a little chat. But we do have a few more questions that have come in. I have some questions of my own, but let's focus on the questions that are coming in from our participants. And so one that we have here is regarding, does CBV require 1099 workers to remember their login information for each 1099 issuer? So for example, for DoorDash, for Uber, do I have to have a separate login for all of those?
The short answer is yes, that you would need to log into those, platforms if you do work for more than one. We have done some things to make that simpler, though. Some of those platforms actually don't require you to have like a user ID and password. It can be as simple as you put your phone number in, they send you an MFA code, and that logs you into the system. I think what we've also found in the market is that gig workers in particular are actually logging in much more actively to these accounts. Every day they're kind of waking up, going to work, and logging into the system to be able to basically kind of do their job. So they actually know those accounts much better than we might, as a traditional worker logging into ADP or Workday.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten a little easier. Excellent. We also have a question here. What happens if someone doesn't want to consent? What happens?
Yeah, I can take that one as well. Yeah, I think, as we mentioned in the remarks earlier, CBV is not the be all end all. We believe that it belongs in your data cascade. I think what we've seen in the market, particularly in social services or government benefits, that we see a success rate around 50 to 60%. So that they see the first screen of our experience, and for whatever reason, that's out all the kind of reasons why they might not do it, but still 5 to 6 out of 10 of those applicants are able to successfully connect their accounts, and then we can retrieve data on the back end. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, but I guess just maybe one last thought there is just again, if that does not connect or if they don't consent, obviously it's voluntary. Then we would recommend kind of falling back to additional data sources in your cascade.
Excellent. Thanks for that. This one might be good for Alicia. How does this interact with existing eligibility systems like legacy MMIS or IES?
So there's a few different ways that you can integrate into an existing system. I think, like Brian was saying, this is API driven. So ultimately, what we ended up doing was integrating directly into the traditional eligibility system. It does require, a little integration effort, but it was relatively straightforward. There are also ways to do this without directly integrating through an API where you can have a report submitted. So you could verify income, but actually submit a report as if it were a pay stub. So that's another maybe like easier path to entry if system integration is a challenge. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. They're rolling in now. Then we have a question about WIOA. Have you seen CBV used by Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, in case folks aren't familiar with that acronym program?
Yeah, I can try to answer this. I haven't seen any specific applications for workforce yet, but I think one of the things that struck me as I was exploring income verification at the federal level was that how widely applicable this could be. Um, just a few years ago, consent-based verification was nearly unheard of in government programs. And what struck me as odd was how pervasive and widely adopted it was in the financial services sector. So, like in banking, in the mortgage industry, this is how you verify your income, is through services like this. So it was really stunning to me that the public sector had just not adopted it yet. That is starting to change, but I think we'll continue to see more programs begin to adopt CBV.
Yeah, I think so too. Another question we have here, we explained earlier regarding how CBV is helpful for things like 1099 income sources like Uber, Lyft, etc. How does this work for individuals who may receive all or part of their income from Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, those types of applications and sources?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time today talking about really the kind of payroll side of CBV and not as much on the bank connection or bank account side. But that is another tool that exists. We offer it, others offer it as well, where you can, connect and log into your bank accounts and then leverage that data to be able to determine income streams that may be coming via Cash App, Venmo, these other kind of forms of income. We do some things to basically kind of like structure the data. So transaction data within bank accounts is a very messy space. But we've built a number of models to be able to kind of pull out those income streams that could be used in a verification.
That's helpful. Thank you. Let's see, what else do we have here? I think we touched on this one earlier, but any issue with an employer knowing that you have access to the information rather than the customers? I believe we got that one already, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about that where just
Yeah.
this is a secure method to be able to kind of access the data. We haven't really seen that, in our interactions in the space. So it's not a
Yeah.
major problem that's come up.
We did get a comment from someone relative to workforce that they use a localized CBV for workforce programs where clients sign a paper document consenting to the exchange of data. And, we are seeing many more of those types of localized pilots around the country. I actually was part of a lab at HIMSS last year regarding this. And San Diego, Miami, a number of jurisdictions are actually kind of piloting some of that with varying degrees of technology. So it's certainly emerging. People are very interested in it. Clients like it because they know when their data is being shared and with whom they have that autonomy and empowerment. So it's a really great thing. Thank you for sharing that. We are starting to get close on time. Before we, wrap things up, I'd like to give our panelists each an opportunity to sort of share some final thoughts, best practices, comments that you want to leave our audience with today.
Maybe I could start. I just honestly, thanks for the engagement here and the questions. We love talking about this as an opportunity in the space. Again, maybe just my high level summary is think of this as a tool in your toolkit that can be helping you to verify income, to lower the burden for both caseworkers and applicants. And this is a kind of low cost and high fidelity and strong user experience way to be able to do that.
Thank you, Brian. Alicia, you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. I'll just say that, I think reducing administrative burden has always been a goal to benefits delivery, but the stakes are so high that we're facing literal existential risk to many of these programs. There are technology services like Argyle that exist that you can adopt quickly. So I would just, encourage folks to learn more about this because it's such a win-win-win. And I think it can make a really huge impact on program integrity, reducing administrative burden, and keeping these programs going.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And we definitely appreciated your, from that side of the fence, having implemented these solutions and seeing the impacts. It's a really great perspective to share. Jennifer, parting thoughts.
Yeah, as someone who has tried their entire career to make things easier, as everyone else on this call, this is probably the most exciting opportunity to take such a large workload off. I mean, if we're talking about 55% conversion rate on payroll and then an IDP upload with accuracy, getting to maybe a 75-80% ready to work case on first touch. It's going to take a while, but I think this is the pathway, and I am excited to be part of providing that relief, not only to workers and states and budgets, but to people who are needing to get these services more quickly than we're able to do today because of the burden.
That is for sure. Well, thank you all for sharing your information. your insights, your experience today. It's been a really thoughtful conversation. So thankful also to our audience participants who provided really great questions and engagement. We don't always see that in webinars, so that's always when you're a part of a webinar, that's what you're shooting for. So thank you for that. We'll just leave you with this. It's not just about making the process faster, right? We want to reduce the burden on your workforce and improve accuracy and confidence in your decision making, and ultimately to create that dignified experience for those who are being served by these programs. So thank you also to APHSA for your partnership and for hosting us today. Again, to all of our panelists, thank you for your insights. If you are interested in learning more or continuing the conversation, I encourage you to reach out to Brian directly. Put his email and his phone number up here. How many people do that directly? Just asking for those folks to come in. So please contact Brian. He'd love to share more with you about Argyle and the great work they're doing around the country. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.